Chapter 34 The Shimmering Girl. On an October afternoon, Louis stood before his parents' house for the first time in more than 3 years. This little home, he said, was worth all of it. As his family filed into the house, Louis paused, overcome by a strange uneasiness. He had to push himself to walk up the steps. The dining room table was heaped with food. 3 years of Christmas and birthday presents sat ready for opening. There was a cake with Welcome Home Louis inscribed in icing. The family ringed around Louis, eager to look at him and touch him. No one asked about prison camp. Louis said a little about it, and to everyone's relief, it seemed to carry little emotion for him. He seemed happy. Sylvia had a surprise for him. She'd obtained a recording of his POW broadcast, treasured by the family because it had given them proof he was alive. As Louis sat nearby, relaxed and cheerful, Sylvia dropped the record on the turntable. The broadcast began play. Louis was suddenly screaming, shaking violently. He shouted, take it off, I can't stand it." Sylvia snatched the record, and Louis yelled at her to break it. She smashed it and threw it away. Louis fell silent. Trembling, his family stared in horror. Louis walked upstairs and lay in his bed. When he finally drifted off, the bird followed him into his dreams. The same man was on many other minds that fall. In debriefings, war crimes investigators listened as POWs told of monstrous abuses and atrocities committed by the Japanese. Over and over, the same name was mentioned: Matsushiro Watanabe. Ultimately, prosecutors had gathered some 250 affidavits concerning Watanabe's crimes. When Tom Wade gave the name, his interviewer exclaimed, "Not the same Watanabe. We've got enough to hang him 6 times already." On September 11th, General Douglas MacArthur, heading the occupation of Japan, ordered the arrest of 40 war crime suspects. While thousands of men would later be sought, this preliminary list included those accused of the worst crimes, including Hideyoko Tojo, mastermind of Pearl Harbor and the enslavement of POWs. Listed with them, reportedly seventh, was Watanabe. When he got the news, the bird was sitting in a bar in the village where his mother lived. He packed a trunk, jumped on a train, and fled to the city of Kofu. There, he heard a radio broadcast about a wanted man and was shocked to hear himself listed with Tojo. In his case, if his case was considered comparable to Tojo's, he thought, arrest would mean execution. He vowed to never let himself be captured. He would disappear forever. He slipped out of Kofu and vanished. As Matashiro fled, the hunt for him began. Police appeared at the home of his mother, Shizuku. She said she might have be with his sister Machiko in Tokyo. She gave them an address and they converged on it. Not only was there no Machiko, there was no house. B-29s had burned the neighborhood months earlier. Shizuka's misdirection and the detectives may have been an honest mistake. Machiko had moved down the road, so the only change to the address was the door number. But the police now suspected her of deliberately misleading them to protect her son. They took her in for questioning. If she knew anything, she let nothing slip. Detectives began tailing and regularly interrogating Shizuku. Her monetary transactions were tracked, her landlord questioned. Matashiro's other relatives and acquaintances were investigated, questioned, and sometimes searched. Police intercepted the family's mail. They even had someone deliver a fake letter, apparently pretending it was from Matashiro, in hopes the family would betray his whereabouts. His photograph was distributed to police in 4 prefectures, and countless special searches were conducted. The police found only one clue. A man who'd seen Matashiro at war's end said the sergeant had told him he'd rather kill himself than be captured. Perhaps the bird was already dead. As the tormentor disappeared in darkness, Louis was pulled into the blinding light. Featured in the media, he was a national sensation. 2,000 people wrote him letters. Press photographers told him. He was buried in speaking invitations, most of which came with an award, so he couldn't decline. In his first weeks home, he gave 95 speeches. The attention was overpowering. Louis was beginning to suffer from suffocating anxiety. Each time he told his story, his gut would ring. Every night in his dreams, the bird stood over him screaming, "Next, next, next." Shortly after returning home, Louis attended a gala where he was slated to speak. He waited to be introduced, anxious. Drinks were set before him, and he sipped them and felt his nerves unwinding. By the time he rose to speak, he was in a haze. The alcohol brought him a pleasant numbness. Soon after, as he fretted over another speech, he opened a bottle of whiskey and poured some in his coffee. It gave him a warm feeling, so he had another shot, then another. The whiskey floated him through that speech, too. From then on, when the harsh push of a memory ran through Louis, he reached for his flask. It was March 1946. Louis was at a club bar in Miami Beach taking a 2 week vacation awarded to servicemen. A door opened. Louis glanced up. Flitting into the club was a shimmering woman, arrestingly beautiful, her hair a tumble of blonde. Louis took one look at and had the startling thought that he would had to marry this girl. The next day, Louis returned to the club, vaulted the fence surrounding its private beach, and lay down near two sunbathing women. When one of the women turned, Louis recognized the beauty from the bar. Louis chatted with her and thought her bright, lively, and very beautiful. When they parted, Louis said something about how he probably wouldn't want to see him again. Maybe, she said playfully. I want to see you again. Her name was Cynthia Applewhite, and forests of men had gone down at the sight of her. She was wealthy and pedigreed, living in her parents' mansion and educated in private schools. But for all her polishing, she wasn't a buttoned up girl. She dressed in bohemian clothes, penned novels, painted, and yearned to roam the world. She was passionate, impulsive, and irresistibly willful. Mostly, she was bored by the vanilla sort of boys who trailed her around and by Miami Beach. Along came Louis. He was a war hero, understood her fiercely independent personality, and was from nowhere near Miami Beach. In the coming days, Louis and Cynthia whirled around town, racing through his hotel and streaming toilet paper out the windows, laughing exhilarated by each other. For Louis, something about this girl seemed to answer to his suffering. Just before he was to leave, he asked her to marry him. She said yes. After Louis left, Cynthia broke the news to her parents. The Applewhites were alarmed that their daughter, who just turned 20, was leaping into marriage with a 29-year-old soldier she'd known for less than 2 weeks. Miss Applewhite refused to give Cynthia money to fly to California to get married. Cynthia vowed to get the money somehow. Louis wrote Cynthia almost every day, and every morning waited for the mailman to bring Cynthia's pink letters. Through her letters were adoring. They revealed how little the two knew of each other. Cynthia had no idea how deeply Louis was haunted by his war ordeal, or that he was turning to alcohol to cope. In critical ways, she was engaged to a stranger. Cynthia vowed to help Louis forget the war, and he grasped her promise as a lifeline. If you love me enough, he wrote back, I'll have to forget it. How much can you love? In May, Cynthia's parents agreed to let her visit Louis and on the condition that they not marry until fall. Cynthia raced to the airport. When her plane landed, Louis bounded up the steps to embrace her, then squired her home to meet his family. The Zamparinis fell for her just as Louis had. Driving away, Louis sent Cynthia drawing backward. Maybe she'd seen something that hinted at all she didn't know. Or maybe impulsive decisions were becoming too real. Thinking she was slipping away from him, Louis lost his temper and said they should end the engagement. Cynthia panicked and they argued. When they calmed down, they made a decision. A few days later, Louis and Cynthia drove to a church. One of Louis's friends walked Cynthia down the aisle, and the couple said their vows. That night, Cynthia called home with the news. She hung on the phone all evening, crying while her mother bawled her out. Unable to get her to hang up, Louis picked up a bottle of champagne, drank it dry, and went to sleep alone.